Okay, so welcome back. It is Thursday. We had a chance to kind of line out some early things. We've started thinking about what a lab notebook might look like. And on Tuesday, we had the very important step of taking a look at just a thesis or dissertation proposal template file so that we can kind of hit the ground running on working on this stuff. So, if you haven't yet had a chance to go to our course website, this is a good moment to get on board with that. So, we've got a couple of examples where I tried to line out each of our kind of major tasks for the semester and sequence those out in announcements on the front page of our course website as we go. So, day one, we got the figure out some kind of way to record not just data, but also all of the metadata, the decisions, the information about the data you're collecting, and the decisions you are making a little bit later on down the line for most of us, except for those of us who have data already in hand, a nice luxury. There are a million little very important decisions that you make as you're setting up and running your statistical analyses. What parameters did I use? What statistical model or equation did I use for this particular analysis that are really, really, really hard to find at the tail end of things when you're folding everything into your thesis or dissertation, getting ready to present and prepare, and almost impossible to figure out when you're taking your thesis or your dissertation and turning that into manuscript articles to send off, to publish, to be successful if you decide to go into the research side of things instead of the professional practice side with a master's degree. So, those little decisions are blindingly obvious in the moment of, wow, this is super important, and I'm having to think a lot about why I'm making this decision the way I am. And it's completely opaque. It's hard to remember in any level of accurate detail once you get past like that 5-minute stretch. Right? Our memories are extremely porous, and we compress memories in a very inefficient and inaccurate way. So let this be your external brain. Whether it's a software-based thing, a physical paper notebook. I prefer physical paper notebooks because I'm old and tired, and this can never crash. Right? And I never have to pay a license fee again for this after I buy it. So that is a thing. Let's go around and just so we can see where people are thinking about, what kind of format have you decided for your lab or research notebook or logbook or bench or desk book? There are lots of different names for it. It's really the same thing across all of them. Your journal. What format have you chosen? For me, write in the rain paper.
I'll go up for the paper field research notebook.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I prefer the old school style.
Yeah, right on. Okay. For those of us who are old school, think about maybe a three-ring binder. You can just keep adding pages to it. Once you get into a situation of filling up a notebook, then you have two notebooks with your next one that you have to manage and know where it is and so forth. This is a little bit more modular and flexible, but it is a little bit easier to tear a page out and lose something important. So trade off with that. Some folks like to do the field clipboard with loose paper. These are $5, $10, like $20 if you want to get a metal one with an antibacterial coating, if you're super worried about that. That's a thing as well. Some folks, this isn't on this list, but some folks find a lot of success because it's more portable and it is also expandable like a three-ring binder setup. The hipster PDA, does anybody know what that is?
PDF, I know, but hipster PDF?
A PDF is a digital portable
Yes.
document format.
Yeah. But hipster?
A hipster PDA. So a PDA is a TLA. A TLA is a 3-letter acronym. That's a self-referential or an autonym joke. Anyway, the hipster PDA is an alligator clip with a bunch of note cards. And because that's pocket size, some folks find a little bit more success with that. So in particular with some of my more neurodivergent colleagues, those with like high functioning autism or ADHD, something like that, the hipster PDA tends to be a good approach. It's also ironic because it's got hipster in the name, and PDA stands for Personal Digital Assistant. So before there were iPhones, we had things called Palm Pilots, PDAs. All right. That was a thing when I was in college, way back during the Salem witch trials. Okay. So this is the announcements section of our site, and typically I try to recap each of our class sessions with links to like the class session recording, for example. And I'll also try to line out the helpful resources on our course website. There are many. Right here on the front page, so you don't have to spend a bunch of time looking for stuff. So for example, the second announcement on our site is all about starting that thesis proposal draft for those of us who have not done so yet. Okay, so in the content area of the website, the area with all the files, the proposal writing like unit, and then the introduction to writing your thesis proposal elements class folder or lesson has the file that we were looking at. That's the detailed outline format template for your thesis or dissertation. Go ahead and download that. Start using it if you want to.
Sorry, did you say that again?
Go on.
Last time I was trying to open links from that template draft which you showed last lesson. Error 404, file not found internet browser.
From these links here?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'll go back through and make sure things are... The files are there. Maybe they moved when I imported this from a previous year. Yeah, I'll go back through and double check stuff. So we'll come right back to right here, but if you ever need to find something just manually, it's in the content section of the site.
Actually, maybe we can try now open that thesis template, detailed outline format, yeah, this one, and right here open any kind of link from this one.
Yeah, I just opened it. It looks like it works on my end.
Okay.
Because for
It
me
might
it's
be...
404.
There are older versions of it, and this one is marked as hidden because it's an older, more outdated file. Maybe the link points to the older one.
Okay.
So, anyway, if you run into that problem, I'm not perfect. I'll go back and test everything and make sure it all works. But if it doesn't, not to worry. You don't have to wait for me to fix stuff. Head straight to the content section of the site. Okay? Cool. So, if we go back to the course home, those announcements will be on the front page. And we'll talk about that one today, but here we are once again. All right, so we've got not just those files, which may or may not be properly linked, but we also have things like this year's class recording where we talked about it, earlier this week, and then a couple of previous years worth. I really started recording this stuff in earnest after COVID perpetrated itself upon our logistics. But we have some older class recordings as well in the file section of the class. This is all optional. You don't have to spend your time listening to this class like 4 times over across multiple years. But sometimes things get explained a slightly different way. Sometimes the students have slightly different questions. So if there's anything that you're curious about, feel free to scan through those. They're there if you want them, and completely ignore them if that's not a useful tactic for you. And then further on in this announcement, we have kind of just a text walkthrough of what is in that template file if for whatever reason you can or don't want to use Microsoft Word. We've got a bunch of that content here as well, front and center, so you don't have to go somewhere else on the website to look for it. And with that, we have our very first writing assignment for the class. So, for our next class session, pull out your laptop or tablet or a smartphone if you're a real cowboy, and just put in the top level headings. If you haven't started writing your proposal yet, we are going to get rid of that blank page, writer's block, as it's called, on our second week of class here. So, write your own list of top-level headings. And top-level headings is just abstract page, table of contents. Don't actually write the table of contents. We don't have it yet. But just like title that section, and then hit Command or Control Enter to insert a page break and put in the next top-level section, which would be maybe introduction, or you might title the introduction chapter background or current context, or whatever you and your advisor agree on as far as chapter titles. Okay, just chapter titles. So this is gonna make a document that's a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages long. It's not gonna have any content. We'll worry about that later. And then stop. If writing is a stressful thing for you, then this is enough to just get the ball rolling, to fill something into that screen. And I'll walk you through every step of the way from there. Okay? So, headings only. No sentences, especially no sentences, or paragraphs, or even content bullet points. We'll put those in a little bit later, and we have a course Dropbox for that, or you can email it to me if you don't prefer using the course website, and email is your love language. All right. And then, importantly, because you're a human being, not a worker robot, not a generative AI or large language model, take a moment to celebrate this milestone. This is a big deal. Like, this is one of those metaphorical first steps that, you'll never be back at this spot. It's always forward from here, okay? It's a little bit like your score in a Nintendo-designed Mario game. Your score never goes down. Your progress never reverses. Even if, God forbid, you should have one of those moments that we often all do in your field data collection or analyses where you're moving in a direction and then you realize, or your advisor commands from on high, that you need to slightly change directions in your analysis or the conclusions you're drawing out of those, whatever. You still haven't lost the progress in the former direction. You had to do that to understand we need to do a minor course correction and move in a slightly different direction. So learn to see that your progress is exactly that. This is a very, very important thing because it can feel like, as we are humans, it can feel like we're doing a lot of stuff for a little bit of insight. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but we need to hold some space for the work and the good things that you are coalescing from the vapor of nuance, as writer Neil Stephenson once said in the wonderful novel Snow Crash. Coalescing meaning from the vapor of nuance. Okay? We have one or a couple of folks who are still kind of developing their topic or research question. One of our immediate next steps is going to be to write the research question, because like we were talking about on Tuesday, everything flows from that, yeah? Everything flows from those hypotheses. So if you just don't know yet because you're just starting, or your advisor is busy finishing off some other grad students and getting them graduated and just hasn't really had a chance to roll around to you yet, that's okay, right? Just let me know. Send me an email. Let me know after class and just say, hey, we're still kind of pulling things together, so we'll just move that deadline back for you a little bit. Not a big deal, okay? But for today's assignment, what you are writing today is common across everything. No matter what your research question is, you still need an introduction chapter, you still need a methods chapter, you still need a lit review chapter in between. So, go ahead and create this file.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Dang, girl. And most importantly of all, whatever file you create, whether it's stored online in OneDrive or on your hard drive and in the cloud as a part of iCloud, or if you use Dropbox or anything like that, store this file there. I want to get in the habit of secure, automated, and off-site backups. Every year in this class, I tell the horror story. One of my colleagues at Virginia Tech, when I was a PhD student, whose laptop was stolen as she was writing her dissertation. And that was the one copy of all of that data and all of that writing that existed in the world. And you know what she did? She didn't slit her own throat. She started over. And she took a couple extra years to finish off her PhD, and by God, she did it. It was awesome. But there's no reason to have to do that, right? Automated backup is cheap. This has what, like a terabyte of space through SIU on OneDrive or something like that? Maybe that's just faculty. I don't know. But your research group should, hopefully, have some kind of secure, offsite, automated. If you have to remember to do this, you're not. We're humans. We're keeping a bunch of other plates spinning or juggling other balls, stuff like that. We're busy and distracted. So, secure, offsite, and automated. So, next question. What if I'm already past this point with your proposal? Go ahead and send me a copy of whatever you got. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't even have to be readable. You don't have to feel proud of it. Just send me what you got, okay? And when you turn in copies of things to your advisor, to me, email stuff around within your research group for proofreading or feedback, that is also creating copies of your work, okay? So do that not just to get the super valuable feedback, but also just to, disseminate your draft work as you go. That's a very, very hard-fought piece of basic wisdom, okay, or hard-earned. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Are we putting in the front page for this?
The front matter?
The front page, like where you have the name and master's thesis, something like that. The front page, are you putting that in for the very first?
That's not necessary for this step, but if you download the template file and use that, you're already 100% done with this step of the process, right? You just download that file and send it back to me. Man, who thought of this? This is dumb. Anyway, okay? So, yes, you can if you want to. I'm the kind of person where I'm just going to start with the complete template file and just start filling in things where I need to. So I do that by default, yeah. It's not necessary when you turn in your proposal to your advisor and then to your committee for review and approval prior to starting fieldwork to have the thesis approval page or anything like that. Just the primary chapters. So introduction, lit review, methods, typically works cited are the 4 that they'll be looking for. Okay? Yeah, question.
And then you said if we have a current draft proposal, we can send that to you. So like that would consist of everything right there, and then like.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's what you're gonna send in for this and the next couple of assignments, right? So one of the next assignments is to write out a first draft. It could be super janky, could be highly polished research question, or if you're a little bit further along, hypothesis pairs. And then from there, we'll start filling in things like subheadings. So within the introduction section, do I have a history section? Do I have a controversy section? Do I have a whatever other context kinds of things I need to put in? So just those subheadings, and in doing it this way, going sort of whole to part and specifying down, what a lot of students tend to find brings forth this is a practice called cueing or priming. In thinking, okay, so what do my subheadings need to be? Your preconscious brain or subconscious brain is going to be thinking about this stuff. So while you're in the shower, while you're staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, thinking, well, at least I'm staring at the ceiling instead of down into the abyss. Could be worse. You'll have little thoughts. So you capture those in your lab notebook, which is right next to your bed, of, okay, so I was thinking about my sitemap subheading in methods. I'm pretty sure I saw a really good sitemap figure in one of our management reports that our research group put out right before I signed on. let me see if I can get that and cite that properly and stick that in and not have to generate a sitemap. So working in this way helps set you up for easy, immediate next steps. It's not a whole lot of work to copy or screenshot a map and then cite it into your draft proposal. Okay, so cueing, priming, letting your subconscious brain kind of gnaw on stuff and set you up for things to plug in later. Very useful and common byproduct of this way of writing. So, all that to say, yes, send me copies of what you already have written. And again, you're not being graded on the content of your writing, you're being graded on your forward progression with it, okay? So, if you don't have a clear sense of what paragraphs to write yet, that's fine. You're just not at that stage yet for most of us. Other questions? Okay. Again, if you get stressed about writing or intimidated by this process, just write the chapter headings and stop. That's good enough. Okay? We'll scaffold and chunk, that is, break down into smaller, sane pieces as we go. The next thing we want to take a look at is our Milestones to Graduation checklist. So in the past 5 to 10 years, there's been some really interesting organizational psychology research and safety research, interestingly enough, on the use of checklists in places like hospitals where people die from just thoughtless accidents, mistakes, fatigue in the medical professionals at that hospital trying to not unalive people. Things like forgetting to wash your hands before doing some kind of a hands-on or even surgical procedure introduces foreign bacteria or parasites or whatever, and the person gets real sick and dies. So the physical act of checking off a checklist item for things that you've done 1,000 times before, and here we will have done some of these 1,000 times before, it helps. It just helps because sometimes we have low blood sugar and we're just not thinking and we forget something. So we put together a couple of years ago this long list of, let's see if this gets a 404. Nailed it. All right. This is pretty much everything that I'm aware of, like all these semesters. Now, I try to give everybody sort of a running head start on this. This starts before, so this is a checklist I'll send to prospective grad students. None of you are prospective grad students. You're already grad students. So the first couple of pages, it feels real good to just like check stuff off, like making it rain check marks, okay? So download a copy of this for yourself, and we will need to, just over the course of this semester, take a look, like a long, detailed, leisurely look through the grad school's website and make sure that none of this stuff has changed, right? So, for example, in semester 1, there are things like select your committee members. So we'll have a conversation about how to pick good committee members, avoid the losers, and how to be a good student to committee members and stuff like that. Some of the soft skills of managing up, as it's called, and so forth. That's typically a first semester thing, but if for some reason the grad school has changed that requirement to you must get this done and have this form signed no earlier than the start of your second semester, we want to know that stuff so we can change and update these checklists and stuff like that. So for any changes that you see, let me know, and we'll rock and roll through those. A lot of the stuff is pretty quick and easy. A few of them are very painful if you forget them or just innocently don't know that you were supposed to do them around a certain time, okay? So this is a generalized list, but it has some pretty good specifics in there. Download your copy today. Start checking stuff off. And I really would recommend printing this out. There's something satisfying about the mechanical process of bubbling these in and seeing how much progress you've already made, maybe without even realizing it. There's a lot of stuff. Okay? Cool. These are mostly official checklisty things. Some of them are more informal, like begin serious job search in semester 3, because if you want to be a university professor with your PhD, for example, the university hiring pipeline, at least in the United States, can take upwards of 6 to 8 months. So that puts it in semester 3 out of 4 for a master's student, or in semester 5 out of 6 for a PhD student in ag sciences. Just to help folks kind of think ahead to stuff that maybe you're not feeling like you have enough energy to figure out on your own, while you're head down in produce data and write stuff mode. Okay? Begin serious networking. Start going to conferences. Have some serious conversations with your advisor. Hey, what conference could I present my thesis work at in semester 4, spring term of my second year, let's say, because I'm pretty sure that the people who can hire me are going to be in that room. Okay, that's a very, very important thing, and there's no substitute for face-to-face presence. As much as we all love Zoom, conferences are just never going to be effective on Zoom until Meta sells all of our souls and we have VR headsets surgically implanted. Okay, so that's linked on the front page as well. That is also in the content area under the class session 3, customizing our curriculum area. Okay. That should be pretty straightforward, but if you have any questions about that, bring those up after you have a chance to look through them. Next up, we want to set ourselves up for success with some prep work for writing a literature review. So one good intermediate step for that is going to be annotated bibliography. Okay, so we tend to use a couple of adjacent or very similar to each other terms in the process of science writing, where there's a meaningful separation between those terms, but it gets kind of blurry in folks who are not super aware of this. So I'm talking about the difference between the meaning of the word motive and the meaning of the word motivation. Okay, believe it or not, that was actually a revision that I got on a journal article last year, and the reviewer was right. I was using the incorrect word. A couple other word pairs that we want to pay attention to in science writing are going to be methods. You probably have a methods chapter in your thesis versus methodology. Methods are what you do, or what you're planning to do, or committing to in a proposal. Methodology, as the word suffix implies, is the study of methods. What's the mindset, the framework, the reasoning on why you chose the methods that you chose, okay? So they're not the same thing, and sometimes you'll see folks putting in a methodology title where they're really talking about methods, and it's splitting hairs. Most of us don't care, but for your committee members that might care, we want to not give them a reason to be irritated at you. Old people are super good at getting irritated, so let's minimize the opportunities for that. Another word pair is going to be bibliography. Which is writing about books or writing versus works cited. So a bibliography is an exhaustive list. It's everything everything within reason that you're able to gather and vet and review and read and understand and organize relative to a particular topic of inquiry. So there are entire books in some fields that are just annotated bibliographies. It's just a huge literature review. Sometimes we call these roundup papers in some of the younger, less formal fields. Really, they are essentially annotated bibliographies. The annotated bibliography we're going to do for this class is not so formal as a book or a journal article publication that's a state of insert field name here, roundup article kind of a thing. The state of forest LiDAR in 2024 kind of an article. Our annotated bibliography is going to be way less formal. This is just a working document that nobody other than you and me are ever going to see. So an annotated bibliography for our purposes is just your out of your brain, so you don't have to remember it poorly, list of everything, every paper that you read for every class, every paper that your advisor has ever published, every paper that you think might be useful to your thesis or dissertation proposal, and all the ones that you read that were not super useful for your dissertation or thesis proposal, because in a future paper, it might be. You read that paper for a reason. You might as well not lose the irrecoverable life that you invested into reading that, or at least scanning that paper or that journal article. Put just like a 1-sentence, 2-sentence explanation of what's interesting, what's controversial, what do I disagree with out of this particular study or publication. How do I think this might be useful? Okay, so the complete citation information, so you can find it again, and maybe the file of the PDF itself, if you are doing this annotated bibliography in a citation manager format, okay? Or at least the file name of the PDF on your computer so that you can not waste life refinding the same publication 5 years from now when you're working on some other project that, this would be the perfect paper and I know I've read it. You can find it pretty quickly in here without having to rescour the whole internet. Yes?
So in the bibliography, do you have like separate sections on like, instead of just like a description of the article or whatever? Is it like the sections like, oh, these were helpful on my thesis, these not so helpful, but like, just like different sections like that? Or is it just one big list that you like scroll through like 1, 2, 3, 4?
If you and I are the only people that are ever going to look at this thing,
However you want.
you do you, boo. No, really. So most people just do, it's literally just a text file. It's not even a Microsoft Word document, so I don't have to deal with formatting and text size changes when I copy stuff in from Google Scholar or wherever I'm getting the citation from. It is just a plain text file that any computer from now until the heat death of the universe will be able to read and understand and not get weird sort of cruft in there as well.
Is that what EndNote is when you're talking?
EndNote is a database, so that's a proprietary format. It's very powerful. It can output that list of citations into any format that you need. There's an EndNote plugin for Word, so you can instantly, type like the first couple letters of a citation and then hit the Find an EndNote button, and it'll put the citation in and put it into your works cited list at the end of the document in the format that you specify. And in certain configurations, like if you have 2 monitors, for example, it'll pull up a preview of the PDF. So while you're looking at your paper and writing stuff, you can glance back through the PDF and stuff like that. And we don't ever want to write stuff twice in this class. So whether it's a simple plain text list or a Microsoft Word document, some people really like to use Excel to be a little bit more organized with it. or if it's something fancy and proprietary like EndNote or Zotero. BibTeX is an open source kind of thing. If you like free as in beer and free as in Libre, like you're a Linux user, go with BibTeX and so forth. Any of the tool doesn't matter, right? It's whatever gets you across the finish line efficiently and effectively for you. So go ahead, and we've all started reading journal articles, right? Okay. Is anybody wondering, when do I stop reading journal articles? Like, how do I know when it's enough?
Never.
Yes, but also no. So this is a really, really important question. Let's talk about saturation. So, how much is enough? And this is fundamentally the same question that you're asking as a graduate student or as a working researcher. No, you are working researchers as graduate students, just other folks are doing it on a salary instead of an assistantship, whatever. How much is enough? How many citations? How many words? Or, like, Park, how long should my proposal be when I turn it into my committee so I don't get laughed out of the room? But also things like analyses. Okay, how many stats tests do I really have to run? Like, let's put this in a format we can all understand. Like, if time is money, you know, how many Benjamins of stats analyses am I looking at? Okay? So at least for the literature searching answer for this question, we look for something called saturation. Show of hands, is anybody familiar with this idea or this term? Great, okay, good, this is a good conversation then. So, when you're putting together your annotated bibliography with an eye towards this being purely a functional document so you can copy paste stuff into your thesis proposal, dissertation proposal, and finally copy paste all of that forward into your thesis or dissertation, and copy and edit it way down for manuscripts. We want to capture all of it into the annotated bibliography and keep capturing, keep downloading more stuff, keep doing forward references, finding papers that cite the paper you're interested in, because they're probably pretty relevant as well, and backwards references. What papers were cited that you don't have yet that your super interesting paper, very helpful journal article, cited in its writing? Okay, so there's backwards and forward citation. And you want to find an interesting paper, do backwards and forwards searches on its citations and what cites its. Capture all of that into your annotated bibliography. And when you start getting that sort of slightly tired, slightly frustrated feeling of, God, I've read this idea like 4 times now. That's when you're getting into saturation. When you read an article that you think is promising and 80% of it or more, right? 80-20 rule, Pareto principle. When you're not seeing near as much new or useful information in additional references that you find and read through and think about and really parse, that's called saturation or theoretical saturation. At that point, you can keep downloading and reading more PDFs until the end of time. But it's not getting you any further forward in your tasks and so forth. And so at that point, 80% or more saturation across, one or a couple of papers, then you can start to think, okay, well, I've read a bunch of papers and I think I've read enough to not be surprised by anything anymore. I'm feeling pretty saturated on this. So I'll stop, and now I'll organize these notes that I have about all of these 50, 75, 200 citations just alphabetically or by date in your annotated bibliography, or not at all, right? Control F or Command F, depending on whether you're a Windows or a Mac nerd, is perfectly good enough for your annotated bibliography to find stuff. If you want to organize things into thematic or content sections, great. Nobody else is going to see it, so you don't want to spend too much time on that. But if that's a helpful thing for you, do it. I find that very soothing. I'm a nerd. I love to have things, big piles of data, lots and lots of documents or files, just kind of sorted out. Not perfectly 100% perfect, like invite my in-laws over and be like, look how I've organized my bookshelf.
Oh.
But like, I know which end of the house to go to if I want a book on some particular topic. Like, that's good enough for me to be functional and not wasting my life on more than that. So whatever level of that organization and tagging and categorization and filing, etc., works for you, be good with that. And don't chain yourself to having it perfect. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. All right? Your next couple of years here need to be about high quality, but good enough. All right? We never get to perfect. And every once in a while, there will be a grad student or a faculty member that signs on, and they never finish. That tends to be a perfectionist problem, more than a motivation problem, more than an intellectual capacity problem, more than anything like that, right? So we want to have compassion for people and ourselves and understand, okay, if I'm feeling stressed out about something, it can be soothing and comforting to organize it, but at some point, I need to move past the organizing and into production, okay? So, for citations, for your annotated bibliography, for your thesis or dissertation, read and read and read and read. Ask your research mates, somebody who's just finishing up, hey, can you send me a zip file of all of the PDFs that you grabbed for your project, because my project is like tagging onto yours, and I'd love to make sure that I'm understanding where you're coming from based on where you came from and reading through those. That's a wonderful way to start the process. Their project is not your project, so their search is not completing your search. But you can get a lot of progress in like 20 minutes having somebody zip up, if they're willing to, zip up their files and send them over to you, okay? Then start reading. Have any of you guys and gals been trained on like how to read a journal article? Okay. It's not like reading a newspaper article. It's just not fundamentally the same thing. And you're approaching a journal article with a very specific set of needs. And so there are some particular skills and habits that go along with doing that effectively. We might jump into that in our next class session so that we can give it full time. But let's see if I can pull up a copy of an annotated bibliography for you. One that was, the whole project was funding one or two graduate students and a professor for a couple of years just to produce a huge and organized annotated bibliography in a particular field. So let's see.
So getting to the point of saturation, some topics kind of bleed into each other, like you can go down rabbit holes of all other kinds of things that are related to one project, but not necessarily another.
Mm-hmm.
How far down a rabbit hole do you go to be saturated? Because I can, like just some of the articles that I've read, like parts of it have been relevant, and I'm like, okay, well do I need to look into like how phosphorus is stratified in different kinds of silt loams and stuff like that? Like I don't know like how far deep I should go.
So I think you are partially answering your own question. For the parts of a particular journal article that aren't relevant to yours, so maybe you have a total phosphorus or by species stratification in soil columns or strata in 3 soil types, one of which is super relevant to your project. You have that soil type at your research sites, but the other 2 don't matter. For the purposes of your work, it's like the parts of that paper that are about those other two, just skip it. Just don't even read those. If they're adjacent enough soil types in this example that like the soil chemistry or something like that might better inform you, read the other two. But you have maybe up to a couple of hundred other journal articles to make hard decisions about in terms of your energy economy, right? You're spending some of your daily budget of decision fatigue on decisions like this. So, learn to get very comfortable very quickly with scanning quickly through an article for first pass of, okay, is this what I think it is? Do I see value in plowing some more time into this or not? Either way, throw it in the annotated bibliography because you put work into it. And then for those that make that first pass cut, I'm gonna read through this and, in full detail, start to finish. Look for the interesting bits, maybe add some notes to my annotated bibliography entry for it at that time so that I know why I spent more time reading it and I'm capturing the stuff and I don't need to find it again. And then from there, a few articles, maybe a few dozen. For a few articles, you want to know inside and out, back to front, all the details, all the things they said, all the things they didn't say, because they're hoping you won't ask, because these are written by human beings, right? With delimitations and limitations in their work and their inferences. And what are the biases of the authors? Why is this paper cited 3,500 times versus another article by the same person or research group that's been cited 4 times, and it's older, it's had more chances to be cited? Okay, yeah, question, comment.
Okay, so technical question. When you are saying about questions which no one should ever ask. But imagine a situation that you are totally prepared for your conference, total confidence, yay, finally. You know for that some weak spots are still left in your project, and poof, magic happens. Someone is asking totally unexpected question. How to deal with that?
Oh, that happens a lot.
Yeah, so how to deal with it? In the most efficient way.
How do you handle the unexpected question?
In most efficient way.
Usually the question is unexpected but not unintelligible, meaning it at least makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense from the perspective of the asker, right? Otherwise they wouldn't ask the question. So you're looking for a quick insight on why did they ask this question that I didn't expect? Are they asking a clarifying question? Maybe I need to explain something better.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not clear. Maybe I need to explain something in a different way because it's clear I did a good job discussing that part of the thing, but I got a sort of a sideways question about it because the person's thinking about this differently than I am. So maybe they ask you a question about your research site because they're doing similar research and they're really trying to understand your methods and your methodological choices. When they're really trying to ask you about methods, but the question comes out about the research site. And they eventually circle around to asking their question about the methods, but they need to think about the question in the process of dialoguing with you about it. Sometimes the question is more of a probing type question where they're asking, maybe they already know the answer or maybe they think they know the answer, but they're very curious in how you're going to respond to that question, right? It's a very pointed kind of question and asked strategically. You get a lot of those probing questions in your thesis or dissertation defense, for example. Your committee members are trying to understand your way of thinking, how you've developed as a research professional, and so forth. So they'll ask sometimes some pretty unexpected questions on purpose. Every once in a while, somebody will ask a question to try to throw you off base to see how you respond to unexpected questions, right? So that's more about probing or testing your ability or your poise as a science communicator and researcher more than it is about any particular detail or specific of your project. As an example, and we'll end class on this, one of my PhD advisors, a guy named Steve Lawson, was working at Virginia Tech as I was going through the system there. And when he arrived to interview, professors typically go on a 2 to 3 day long interview. You have to teach a class, you have to give a research seminar, you have to talk to the dean, the provost, talk with a bunch of students, and then over the course of that 3 days, you meet pretty much everybody, get tours of the facilities. Ruffner gave me a driving tour of Giant City while I was interviewing here. And on his interview, on Steve's interview, at the end of his research seminar, where he'd spent an hour giving a very detailed PowerPoint presentation of these are the kinds of research that I do, these are the research partners that I'd like to work with, you know, basically establishing, hey, I'm going to be a productive researcher and teacher here at the university if you hire me. One of the unexpected questions that Steve got at the end of that research seminar, where people are asking questions, was from the oldest faculty member in the department that was trying to hire him. The faculty member leaned back, put his feet up on the desk in front of him, laced his hands behind his head, and said, "Steve, this is bullshit. Your whole presentation's bullshit." And then he stopped talking to see what Steve would do, to see if Steve could, beyond, developing and presenting a slick research presentation where, he looks pretty good, he looks pretty smart. How does he handle unexpected questions?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Bullshit.
That was an unexpected question. So, I need to reconfigure that on my watch. Anyway, new watch. So, can I answer your question? There are lots of different reasons
Now
for...
I'm curious, so how he reacted to that bullshit statement?
Yeah, what did he do?
What he done?
Steve, we're over time, so you can pack up if you need to. Steve is a very smart and also politic, meaning discretionary guy. And he realized that it wasn't a challenge. The professor wasn't being serious, although he had a serious tone of voice in saying that. He said, well, that's an interesting observation. Let's go through some reasoning and justification and sort of illumination on why this isn't actually bullshit, right? So these are methods, these are new computer modeling techniques that we've developed in concert with the United States Federal National Park Service. I'm not making any of this stuff up. We're using this stuff, and it's making the lives, or at least the visits to national parks, of hundreds of millions of people a year better already. Like, this stuff is out in the wild, and it's working. And let me give you an example of that, and so forth. So he explained and essentially talked through the justification section of a proposal in his answer to that question of, or that statement of it being bullshit.
Because this story reminded me of one story from old country Europe. Also similar situation, but guy he was reacting a little bit different. He was like that. Interesting approach. Good sir, can you please explain what is your concept of bullshit from your perspective? Please explain your concept of bullshit from your perspective.
Yeah. So, seeing how people respond under pressure, really. And that's a valid kind of question. So, at your thesis defense, or dissertation defense, your professor and committee members, your major advisor and committee members are explicitly allowed to ask you anything, literally anything. So we'll talk about some strategies to prepare for that and what to expect, even the unexpected. All right? Now we're way over time, so if you have any questions, about our annotated bibliography assignment, just start writing stuff down, okay? A couple of words, a sentence or two about each of these things so that you don't have to ever go back to anything and so that you don't lose anything good, okay? Cool. Take a look at the checklist and milestones for graduation. See you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
All right.